Hello, everyone. Welcome to the APAC Partner Training GA4 Major Features Comparisons. Today's session will be recorded, and the slide and the link to the video will be shared to you. Okay, next slide, please. Today, we have 4 amazing GA4 experts who are going to teach us about amazing GA4 features. We have Vivian Huang, please wait, thank you, Iris Chen, Mark Girard, and myself, Hitomi Yonea. Next slide, please. Here is today's agenda. I'm putting all the hours in JST, Japan Standard Time, but for the next 30 to 40 minutes, we will spend the time talking about the amazing GA4 features, and we will also spend a bit on the account structure of GA4. And after that, we would like to spend around 20 minutes answering questions from you, the audience. We think it's very important to spend as much as time on answering questions. So the presentation part will go relatively quickly. Next slide, please. GA4 major features. Next slide, please. This is the recap slide from the previous partner training. And let me just quickly recap on this. For the last 1 year, we have been focusing on the very bottom of this pyramid, which is tracking the foundation. We have been asking the partners to do dual tagging of GA4 alongside the universal analytics. For the next 1 year, we would like to move on to the upper side of the pyramid, which is media activations and data integration and measurement implementations. Today, we'll be talking more on these 2 areas, media activation features and data integration and measurement implementation features. Next slide, please. What we will be talking today is also covered in the Help Center. We actually created a dedicated page for the GA4 migration. So what we will be talking about, of course, we will share the recording and the slide, but you can also take a look at the Help Center article for more detailed step-by-step implementation guide. Next slide, please. With that, I would like to pass on to Mark.
Thanks, Hitomi-san. So next slide, please. So the G4 journey started maybe like 2 years ago. It's a long journey, but we still have a lot to do in front of us. And so far, we focused a lot on the implementation side. And I will take that time to thank you all partners because we're in good shape on that side, and it couldn't be possible without you. If you have still a few clients who didn't implement GA4, please convince them as soon as possible. But now it's the time to convince our advertiser to use GA4, to start using it. And it's not that easy because, as you know, GA4 has a totally new data model, as a new UI, new features, and new concept. So it might be a bit hard for clients to learn GA4. So today we're gonna focus on some key features, so important key features to make sure that you completely understand the difference between UA and GA4, and to help you in your discussion with your client about them. And don't forget that GA4 is still a work in progress, and the more people use it, the more feedback we're gonna get, and a better product we're gonna have at the end. And it's good for the advertiser, for the partner, and for us at Google. So next slide, please. And this is the first feature we're gonna talk about today is data import. So next slide. So data import is not completely new. It existed in a universal analytics property. It's for collecting data that is not happening on your website or on your mobile app, or something happening on website or mobile app, but you don't want to collect it directly. So you want to have like an offline way to collect that data into your property. And you can do that. You can import data from a lot of different systems like CRM or CMS or point of sales or any kind of offline data. Now the key differences between UA and GA, and because all those differences, all this improvement was based on the feedback that we hear for many years. So the first one, I think, is very nice. If you remember, in Universal Analytics property, when you did a data import, you didn't really have the feedback to understand if the import was happening well or not. So now you get a feedback. You will see how many rows were imported successfully, and you will have a match rate with your existing data in your property. So that's a big improvement. And at the same time, another improvement is that UA data import was only about data widening. So you were importing dimensions. Here you can really import events, like complete events, and you can then, because you import events, you can then mark that event as a conversion. So you can import conversion event, which wasn't possible with goals, for instance, because it was only dimension and you couldn't import an event in a universal analytics property. Another thing I wanted to mention is the future of data import. So that's why it's marked that's partially launched, because we still have some part of the feature to launch. Campaign data import, which is necessary for UTM-ID, will be launched next year. Scheduling as well to automate the data import will be launched. And we might work as well on other kind of data import. So it's pretty exciting. I can't talk about it now, but stay tuned for other kind of data import. And next slide, I think it's Itomi-san about audiences.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Hello again. So next slide, please. I will be talking about audiences in GA4 and some of the differences between UA and GA4. As you already know, audiences let you segment users in the ways that are important to your business. And I believe you have been using audiences in Universal Analytics already. Who is this for? Yeah, audiences allows you to analyze behaviors of any subset of users within Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, and also in GA4. And the amazing thing about audience is that it allows you to remarket to the site visitors in Google Ads and other platforms as well. So it's a very powerful key features in GA4. The key differences between Universal Analytics and GA4 in terms of audiences. The first difference is the number of audience lists in GA4 and Universal Analytics is different. And for GA4 free, you can create up to 100 audiences list. And for GA4 enterprise version, you can create up to 400 audiences. On the other hand, for Universal Analytics, you can create up to 2,000 lists. So when you plan to migrate some of these audiences lists, you might need to kind of cherry pick the ones that you actually use in GA4. But in GA4, we have a very exciting feature called predictive audiences, which is readily available for GA4 users. Next slide, please. There are three ways to create the new audiences in GA4. First is to create the new audiences from scratch. The second is to use the system template for audience creation. And the third, which is creating predictive audiences. Next slide, please. Yes. And here are some sample predictive audience lists, like likely 7-day purchasers and likely 7-day churning users. And this feature is only available in GA4, so I highly recommend you to try these um, predictive audiences if it's available to your clients. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, let me talk about bit to conversions. Next slide. Thank you. So, what does it mean, bit to conversions? It means measure the conversions in GA4, share it to Google Ads, and optimize your client's Google Ads campaign towards the GA4 conversions. And this was doable in Universal Analytics, and this is doable in GA4. And who is it for? Yes, you can optimize Google Ads campaign towards GA4 conversions, which is more flexible, and you can kind of set it up in very interesting conversions, perhaps using predictive metrics as well. Some nuances and tips. The Universal Analytics and GA4 conversion number will never match exactly. There will always be some discrepancies, and which is expected. However, try to make sure these numbers are within the reasonable range before you start bidding towards GA4 conversions. Um, yeah, I would recommend that you wait for um, maybe 2 weeks after implementing your GA4 conversions just to compare your data to Universal Analytics conversions. Next slide, please. GA4, you can export the conversion, both web and app conversions, to Google Ads. Next slide, please. The step is really easy. So the first step is to initiate the Google Ads and GA4 linking from the GA4 UI. Next slide, please. Then, after the Google Ads and GA4 are linked, you can go to the Google Ads UI and import Google Ads GA4 conversions to Google Ads. And you can specify if you want web conversions or app conversion to be imported. Next slide, please. With that, I would like to pass on to Iris for measurement protocol.
Thanks, Hitomi-san. So today I'll be walking you through on measurement protocol. Next slide, please. Yeah, so today the status of launch for measurement protocol is it is in public beta. This means that we do not foresee to make any groundbreaking changes in the API without further notice. The expected general availability is in Q1 next year. The main objective of measurement protocol is to enrich data already collected by our tags or SDK, and this is done by sending additional data and events to analytics that happen outside of your website or the app. There are two main use cases for measurement protocol. The first one is to tie online to offline behavior, and the second one is to incorporate events that cannot be tracked by a tag or the SDK. Some examples of this is sending offline e-commerce events from your point of system sale or sending offline lead events back to GA4. Once your measurement protocol data is already in GA4, you can do a lot more. For example, you can see your measurement protocol hits via reporting, you can create audiences, you can export your conversions via MP to Google Ads, and use them as bidding signals. There are main differences between UA and GA4. The primary one is there is a different design proposition, which I will cover later in the next slide. This is also the first time for app data to be sent in MP. We are also introducing the API secret, which is created per stream, not per property. This will add additional security and prevent your MP API hits from becoming source of spam. We're also requiring you to add additional parameters for both app and web, which you see in the slide. In terms of documentation, we have a bunch of helpful documentation, but I'd like to highlight two of them. The first one is the Event Hit Builder, which allows you to create your MP hits and validate them. Another one is the Code Lab for app MP hits. This will give you step-by-step instructions on how to create your hits, validate the steps, as well as the Python script that you can reuse. Moving on to the next slide. As alluded in the earlier slide, there's a different design positioning for both UA and GA4. Let's look at the UAMP first. So it was designed as a protocol to be used by all data ingestion by the tags as well as the SDK. For GA4MP, it is a protocol primarily for extending data already collected by the tag and the SDK not in the same device. Next slide, please. I'll pass it on to Vivi for Google Ads linking, Google Signals, and user ID.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Vivian. And now let's talk about Google Ads linking, Google Signal, and user ID. I believe many of you are familiar with this already. These are the low efforts, but also most important prerequisites for advertisers to activate media use cases on GA4. And today, I'm not going to talk about how to set this up, as we have very straightforward instructions on the Help Center, which is linked here. And it's pretty much the same as what you did on Universal Analytics. But I want to highlight a few differences with the Universal Analytics. First, as we fully integrate web and app data on GA4, with Google Ads integration, our clients will have a holistic view from campaign engagement to online behavior across devices. And worth to mention is that YouTube EVC is also available on GA4 reporting to measure view-through conversions. And we will have modeling techniques available on GA4 that to empower the conversion measurement with machine learning in the privacy world. These are the more powerful things that we added into products for our client to perform a more accurate campaign measurement. Next slide, please. And for modeling and the EVC reporting I talked about, another requirement is to turn on the Google Signal, which will enrich the report with Google sign-in data. And this is also generally available, despite not yet able to activate this on the server-side GTM. So when you turn it on, we will perform the session unification based on Google sign-in data and give you cross-device insights. Again, the details are included in the documents attached here. Next slide, please. Yeah, and finally, the user ID. This is the feature that our advertiser can add their login ID from their websites, so we will understand the behavior across devices of the actual users. We have the same features on the Universal Analytics, but if some of you still remember, we only provided a user ID specific view for reporting purposes. Now, on GA4, we can do remarketing, we can do general reporting, demographics based on the user ID as well. So the only caveat here is if you want to use the user ID for reporting, we need to separately send user properties to log the custom dimensions, given the user ID is reserved for ID unification only. So here you can see an code example. We will log two IDs. One is the user ID. The other one is the custom user properties. The name is called CRM ID, but you can customize the name for whatever you like. And for reporting on this dimension, you will need to set the CRM ID as the custom dimensions. So you will be sending the same ID, but to different user properties. So one for user ID unification, the other one for reporting purposes. Next slide, please. So once you turn on the Google Signal and use user ID and you perform the Google Ads linking, we will give you the cross-device measurement. You can also do remarketing based on that. So the ID unification will be based on this order. We will start from the user ID, which is the client's login ID on their websites. And if we don't have user ID, we will then use Google Signal, which is the Google sign-in data. And lastly, if we don't have the Google sign-in data, we will then use device ID, which is the client ID. And this is what we call in the universal analytics world. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is the device report before we turn on the Google Signal. So as you can see in the report tab in the tech area, we'll be able to see different streams coming from web and app, and these are all separate. So once we turn on Google Signal, or you send user ID to GA4 properties, next slide, please. We will start collecting the Google sign-in data, and this is what you may see on your report. We will be able to analyze the overlap between different platforms, and same as all the figures on the reports in the reports on GA4 will be based on the ID unification on the order I mentioned. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that's almost everything about Google Ads linking, Google Signal, and user ID. So now I want to spend a little bit more time to talk about account structure. So account structure is not a feature that we want to activate, but this is also a very important concept and something that you would like to review with your client, even before you help your client do the dual tagging. Right, because your clients might have web and might have apps, and all of these are coming together in the same properties on GA4. There are a bunch of resources available to talk about account structure. So you might want to spend some time to study that before you help the assessment for your clients. But here are the 3 guiding principles I want to highlight. First is the data should be generally analyzed together. So if you have the websites that is for a certain business, even though you have subdomain or you have different localized URL, it should be all analyzed under the same property. The same string. So data should be in the one GA4 property here. And secondly, for 360 clients, they will be able to leverage the sub-properties and the roll-up properties to flexibly arrange their analysis. So for clients who have multi-countries, or they want to set up the user access for different, something like the views in the Universal Analytics, they might want to leverage the sub-properties, which will be officially launched next year. We have an early access interest form that was sent through emails a few weeks ago. The link will be attached on this slide later. So you might want to look at this and sign up for your clients if they're interested in. Lastly, if your clients have app and a web to be migrated to GA4, it doesn't matter which one go first, but you might want to remember to upgrade one of these first and then create the other web stream or app stream and then link that to the existing properties. Because if you happen to have the web and app in different properties, when you move that into the same property later, we will unfortunately lose the historical data. So this is a reminder I want to highlight here. Next slide, please. So here is all the resources that we have for partners about account structure. Most of these are on our Help Center articles. I want to highlight the last one, which is the partner-only resources on our enterprise marketing portal. So here's the deck talk a lot more about how we should set up an account structure based on the 3 guiding principles I mentioned today. So please take a look and let us know if you have any questions. Last, let's talk about the general resources. Next slide. Yeah, so here are the resources available to you. In each slide today, we attach all the Help Center articles that's relevant to the features. So again, a lot more details are mentioned on the articles. So please take a look and study that and ask us more questions if you have. Secondly is the GA4 office hour. We have one regularly set up for the English version and also another monthly ones in the Japan time zone. So please feel free to leverage the GA4 office hour that's suitable for your language and your time zone and ask questions after today's training. And third, we have GA360 support as usual available. So the support team that you are working with on the universal questions today, we actually have the team support on the GA4 properties as well. Lastly, it's more about the general introduction today, and there will be more training to be delivered next year from Q1 to Q2. So stay tuned on that, and please prepare all the questions and feel free to leverage the resources listed here. And we will see you soon in next year. So next, let's do the Q&A session. So I will hand it back to Hitomi.
Thank you. So for the first 3 or 4 questions, we will answer the questions that you submitted through the form. And after that, we would like to open up for live questions. And you can type your questions in the chat or in comments, and we can see that. There might be 10 seconds delay, but we can definitely see your comments and questions. So please start typing in if you have any questions. For the first question, it's about measurement protocol. Who is answering this one? Is it Iris?
Thank you, Hitomi-san. So I'll read the question first for everybody. So our client uses GA4 measurement protocol to send e-commerce data and uses GTM to implement web events. If a user uses the same device to browse our client's website and triggers an e-commerce event, we anticipate user behavior will merge automatically by session ID and client ID, but this is not happening in GA4. So the way that MP is built in GA4 is primarily to extend the data already collected by the tag or the SDK. Therefore, session ID is not expected as a parameter, and we do not collect this along with the MP hits. So it's not expected that the MP hits to be aggregated under the same session as from gtag.js. So in your example, if the e-commerce and the rest of the web traffic is happening from the same client device, then we recommend to consider GTM and GA tag implementation for e-commerce tracking. Now I'll pass it on to Mark to answer the next 2 questions.
Thanks, Iris. So we have 2 other questions on the measurement protocol. And we understand it's a bit confusing because, as Iris said, the purpose of the measurement protocol on GA4 and on UA is very different. Maybe we should have not used the same word to describe it. So think as a measurement protocol for GA4 like something different, very different. Here, clients want to send UTM parameters, and on the other question, they want to send a default event. At the moment, it's not possible. You can only measurement protocol will only accept e-commerce event and a custom event as well. You can check the reference on the documentation. there's few things. The workaround would be to use a custom event for any kind of event. You can use a custom event for your UTM parameters values and for the default event. There's two challenges here. The first one would be to replicate the logic of when those default events are fired. Like to take an example, session start. You have to replicate when we trigger session start. If you can do that, then the second challenge will be in the reporting side, because you will use a custom event, and in the GA4 property, it will be treated as a custom event, not as session start, for instance. So you will have to recreate reports in BigQuery or in Data Studio to replicate the logic in terms of reporting. So a lot of work, a lot of custom work for this. If you're not satisfied by the situation of the new status of measurement protocol for GA4, I would advise you to contact your partner manager and to describe the use case, describe the feature request, and explaining why it's important for your clients. This is a new direction for the measurement protocol, but this is still work in progress. So we are pretty open on making some changes. Thank you. And I think the next question is for Iris. Oh.
The next question is about user ID. So the question is, the app user ID, web user ID cannot share the same dimension by default. If we follow GTM implementation guideline to implement web GA4 and follow Firebase APP GA4 official implementation, user ID will end up showing different dimensions in GA4. There is much ad hoc analysis required. User ID shows up as the same dimension without additional settings like using member ID or in user properties. How can we deal with this? So I'm not fully aware of the issue that user ID will be different from app and a web. Supposedly, it should be the same ID for the ID unification that I mentioned earlier. However, if you want to do the user ID for reporting purposes, highlighting this again, we would need to set up a separate user properties to log this user ID. And then you need to register these user properties as the custom dimensions in order to have this on the analysis report. So this is some tricky steps and a bit of caveats that you want to remember here. So if you still face the issues that user ID cannot be unified across app and a web, please let us know or leverage the GA360 support to help you further troubleshoot. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, okay, I'm hearing myself. Mark, if you could mute yourself. Thank you. Yeah, with that, we've answered all the questions from the form, and we will be taking live questions. The first question, thank you. When the create time import mode will be available in GA4, is it only available on GA4 Enterprise? Mark, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I can take that. So query time is already available for some data import. By memory, it's in the presentation actually. Give me that. So yeah, for cost and item you use query time, but you can't use them in audiences. That data which you could do with Universal Analytics data import. This is a limitation for now. Product team is still working on it. I'm not aware if there will be like a difference with the GA4 360 version. So stay tuned for improvement next year.
Next question is how to sign up for the GA4 office hours. You might want to contact your partner manager. They definitely know when this is happening. For English one, it's happening on Friday around noon-ish. And there is you need to submit the form, the kind of submit the questions in advance. If nobody asks the question, the office hour will be cancelled. So please ask your partner manager for the time, a link to the Hangout, and also the link to the form so you can ask your questions. Next, Jose, hello. Perhaps using a new name for this is a good idea. It feels like we're using the same thing, same name for different things.
Yes, I
And this
mean,
is for measurement protocol. Mark, you have some opinion on this?
yeah, well, it was kind of my ID, so I take this one. Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna suggest that, but I'm not sure if it's possible to change the name right now. It's always hard to change names. But well, we changed from App Plus Web to GA4, so everything's possible. But yeah, I take the feedback and do the same feedback to the product team. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you. The next question, hello from Lou. Will GA4 support to tracking mini program or PWA in the future? Bibi, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah. So I think for mini programs, this might refer to the WeChat mini program. And currently, J4 is not supporting PWA or AMP and even mini program as well. So as Mark just mentioned, we might want to talk to your partner manager and escalate with business use case. And we can also help further analyze whether this feature request makes sense. This is currently not in a very short-term roadmap, but we will also closely work with product team to prioritize that if we think the use case is very important. So please let us know more details. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, does UA property eventually disappear in 2023? Mark, would you like to take this one?
Sure. This is the million-dollar question. So what we know for sure is that yes, eventually UA property will disappear. Okay, this is a given. We're not going to live in a world with two analytics product forever. But for a date, for a precise date, we don't know yet. It was not confirmed, so we don't know if it's next year or in 2 years or in 3 years or later on. We will obviously keep you updated as soon as possible. This is important for your relation with your clients, and I think we will give an update on this next year. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Next one is from Billy. Is it possible to create app audience list to Google Ads based on custom event from measurement protocol hit right now? Iris, would you like to take this one?
Thanks, Hitomi-san. So, Billy, the short answer is yes. Thank you.
All right. The next question, is it possible to export GA4 data to non-Google Ad platforms? It's an interesting question. So we currently it's linked to Google Ads and also DV360. So those two are definitely possible. And through DV360, you can use the data for non-Google Ads display networks. The other possibility is to export data to BigQuery. And once the data is exported to BigQuery, it's your data. You can use that data for non-Google ad platforms. Another idea, well, it's not really ad platform, but it is GA4 is going to be linked with Salesforce. So that's another possibility as well. But other than that, at this moment, there is no like product to product linking between GA4 and non-Google ad platforms. I think the best solution would be to export to BigQuery and use that data for non-Google ad platforms. I hope that answers the questions. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, we will wait for 2 more minutes. Good. Thank you. Regarding introducing UA to GA4, to check the expected event volume in GA4, should we check by GA4 dwell setup for all UA360 properties used by our client? Is there any other method? Anybody wants to take it? Mark, would you like to take this one?
I'm not sure to understand actually.
I can try to take that.
Yeah,
Okay.
you got it? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I think in general, the event volume on GA4 will be higher than Universal Analytics because the data structure is different, right? In Universal, you will have everything nested in a hit, but then it might need to be separate events on GA4. We don't have like an official estimation guideline for you. But in average, we can put around 1.5 times of the hit volume on UA, which may be the estimated event volume on GA4. But again, each client will be very different based on their measurement structure. So you might be right. The most straightforward thing is to check on the GA4 dual setup and to see how the event volumes differs from Universal Analytics. I don't think we have other projection tool available in the market yet. Thanks.
Thank you. Would GA4 also have native integration with CDP platforms similar to GA360?
I can maybe say a few things about it. I'm not completely sure what you mean by CDP integrations here with GA360, but it's on the roadmap. We'll have a few integrations coming next year. SS360, DB360, Salesforce, so all the regular Google integration that we had with GA360. So yeah, it's on the roadmap for next year.
I can take this one. Would GA4 be able to import offline data points to factor into its modeling? And when you say modeling, I assume it's predictive metrics modeling. Right now, you could technically send offline conversions using measurement protocol and set it as a purchase event and kind of ask GA4 to train the model towards that offline conversion. It's not really documented anywhere, but it's definitely possible. So that is possible. What's not possible is to put data into custom dimensions, like offline information into custom dimension and use that data for modeling as a part of predictive metrics. That's not possible. The predict metrics does not take into account any data that's in custom dimensions at the moment. However, that's a really interesting feature request. I would recommend you to submit a feature request to GS360 support with your use case and the product team. I know the product team is really looking into the use case of predictive metrics. And if you have the offline data usage for predict metrics, please do share that case with the GA support, and they will deliver the message to the product team. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I can take it.
Yep.
So the question is, when will processing time support for item data import be available? So we don't know yet. It's not precisely indicated on the roadmap yet. So Billy, I would advise you to make the feedback to your partner manager to get more details. Sorry, I can't be more helpful on this one. But I can take the next one. Yes, this one. So question is, as I know, using UAG360 and GA4 360 at the same time is impossible, then how client can transfer from UAG360 to GA4 360 without losing data? So it's not completely true. There is some confusion here. All clients, all UAG360 clients can use the beta of GA4 360. And they can use that beta for free, and they can use it right now, the GA4 360 beta. You can even find on the Help Center the way how to activate the GA4 360 beta. But where the confusion comes from is if they sign a GA4 360 contract, which I don't think it's possible right now, but it will be possible in a few months. Then we will deprecate the UA360 property, I think 90 days after the contract. So our recommendation here is sign the GA4 360 contract only when your client is completely comfortable with GA4, and it doesn't have to be next month. It could be in a few months. But yeah, just sign the contract when you know you can give up the UA 360 property 3 months later. Okay, that's our recommendation for now.
Next question. Will UTM term and UTM content available in GA4 in the future? Does anybody know on this one?
Yeah, I can take it. So this is an ask from many partners and even internally that we want UTM term and UTM content made available by default in GA4. At the moment, you can register them as custom dimension. So they are present in GA4, but you need to register them as any other custom dimension. But it will be there's a feature request to make them by default available. Yeah, I hope I answered.
Well, that was a lot of interesting and fun questions. Thank you, everyone. We will wait for another 2 minutes to make sure everyone had a chance to ask the questions. After the launch of in the APAC market, will the continue to be serviced? Does it existing disappear? I believe she's talking about Universal Analytics version of 360.
I think she's gonna write. She just sent a message. Sorry, so I think she's gonna send another message.
Okay. So
to precise.
Okay, sure. Then we will wait for your new message. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Hi, Dennis. I find this message appears in all reports. Are all reports thresholding by default? Threshold applied. This report has threshold applied and only returns data in analytics when the data meets a minimum aggregation threshold. Interesting. It, not all reports should. It's not by default, definitely. There might be some filter that's being applied. I don't know. Maybe this is something you could ask the support team to look at because it's definitely not the default setup. Unless you have a huge data that's coming in and you're trying to filter something.
I think he
Maybe.
might refer to the demographics data. There's a new threshold launched. Yeah, but I'm not sure what the question here is. Like I didn't see the question.
Yeah, so the question is, this message appears in all the reports or reports thresholding by default?
Yeah, just looking at the relevant help center right now, I believe this applies on the demographics data, where we when we use Google sign-in data to give you demographics and affinity, I think we will have a threshold applied. So the user count need to be above a certain limits. I'm not sure if it's the privacy concerns, but yeah, I don't think this applies on all the reports.
Thank you, Vivi. Yeah, I recommend that the person talk to the support team to troubleshoot.
I can take this one.
Thank you.
So after the launch of the new GA360, so the GA4 360 in APAC market, will the UA standard property continue to be serviced? Does the existing UA property disappear? So for now, yes, the UA property continue to be serviced. It will be deprecated at some point. We don't know yet. We don't know if it's next year or in 2 years or in 3 years or longer time. So when we launched the new contract for GA4 360, your UA property will still be available. No worries. Until a certain time. That has not been announced. Next question. I can take it. So as I know that GA4 won't include past historical data, it starts tracking only after the mod is created. So the historical data should export to BigQuery. So this is a very important question. Yes, you start to collecting data when you add the GA4 tag, either through GTag or GTM. We don't transfer the data from the Universal Analytics property to the GA4 property because it's different data model. We don't do it. Meaning when you create a GA4 property, you have zero data. You have none. And you implement the tag and you start collecting the data. Yeah, that's it. Next.
Any questions?
You have 6 minutes.
Yep. Okay, let's wait for 2 more minutes to make sure everyone had the opportunity to answer the ask the questions. Okay, it seems we don't have any more questions. So with that, we would like to conclude today's session on Google Analytics for major features and Q&A sessions. I hope this was useful. And yeah, we're going to continue to have more training next year. So stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
day.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Bye bye.